Okay, my name is Carmen Bold. I'm the oral historian at William & Mary. It's currently around 2:30 p.m. on May 31st, 2018. I'm sitting at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, Illinois with Judy Che-Castaldo, class of 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could start by talking about the date and place of your birth and what years you attended William & Mary.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I was born in Hong Kong in 1981, and I attended William & Mary in between 2000 and 2004.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. And so can you tell me a little bit more about where and how you were raised and some about your family?
Sure. Where to start? Yeah, so I was born in Hong Kong, so I was raised there until I was 9, and then my family immigrated to the States when I was 9, and so we moved to Ohio, northwestern side of Ohio, and that's where I spent the rest of my childhood before going to college.
Great. And did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister. She is 3 years older, and then my brother is 11 years younger.
Okay. Wow. And what sort of things did your parents do? Why that part of Ohio in particular?
Yeah, so they, my aunt moved here first. I think she married an American and then moved to the States, and then she applied for visas for us to move here, and that was likely because of the China taking over Hong Kong in, goodness, what year was it? I can't remember. Was it 97? And so we were kind of afraid of that, and so in order for them to give me better opportunities, and my sister, of course, at the time, we moved to the States. And so my aunt was in North Ridgeville, Ohio, and she had a restaurant there, and so that's where we moved.
Okay, great. So when did you first start thinking about college?
Oh my goodness, probably in high school, right? When people, we started taking the pre-SATs and all the tests, and the counselors started to talk to us about opportunities. And I remember one meeting with a counselor where she recommended that I apply for the Gates Millennium scholarship program. And so that was, I think, one of its earliest years when it had just started, and so I applied for that, and several months later I found out I received it, and so I actually was able to expand my options by quite a bit, because most of my family, my cousins, they all went to Ohio State, which is local, and it's in-state, and so I was able to explore other schools.
Great. Mm-hmm. And so how did William & Mary in particular get on your radar?
Oh my God, that's actually a funny story. So I went to, what was it called? It was, I call it nerd camp, but it was like a gifted program for kids starting senior year in high school. And so I joined that camp that summer, and there was another participant who, his dream school was William & Mary. And so he told me about it, and I researched it, and I applied. So
did you ever get to go on campus before your first day as freshman?
Yes. So that other person, Matt Meeks, he also ended up going to William & Mary, and he and I took a train trip, like an Amtrak trip, down to Williamsburg from Ohio to tour the school for a weekend. So, yeah, we did get to see it.
And what were your memories of that trip? Like, what did it look like, smell like? What do you remember?
The thing that I remember most was how empty it was, because it was right after graduation. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't go until we had time in our high school schedule, and so it was, I think, probably early June or something. And so everybody had just gotten out. We went to the, what is that? Not the UC, but the other center. It used to be the bookstore.
Right, yes, I know what you're... Yep.
Something center. Yeah, that other center, and there was a help desk there, and so we were just walking around, going into all the open buildings that we could, and so that was one that was open, and we talked to the girl who was at the counter, and she was graduating senior for the next year, and so she talked to us and told us her experience, and she just loved it, and that was the thing I remember the most.
Great.
Yeah.
And actually, when nobody is around campus is kind of when we love it.
Yeah.
It's unusual.
Exactly. So it was, I think you can definitely tell the historical setting and the buildings, really different from anything we saw in Cleveland, where the other schools I had toured were Case Western, and of course Ohio State, so those are really different kind of settings.
And so what finally won you over, if there was a thing?
Oh, I think it was, I had already decided at that time. So, the decision was both like having this friend at the time, who really recommended it and just loved it. Another factor was how small the Greek life was on campus. So I thought that was good for me because I wasn't interested in that at all. So it seemed like a good fit.
Great.
Yeah.
So what did you choose to study and why? And did you know what you were going to study when you got there?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So in high school, I took a biology class, and my high school teacher took me aside one afternoon and was just, asking me what I wanted to do. And I said, well, maybe I want to be a magazine editor, which I didn't even know what that meant, right? I mean, so I wasn't, particularly good at writing or anything. But she said, no, I think you should go into science. You're showing real interest in biology, and so she recommended that I follow that, and so I just took her advice basically. And William & Mary also had a good biology program, and so that's what I majored in, and I stuck with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what was that experience like, being a biology major at William & Mary?
It was great. I really enjoyed it. I know some people found it a little bit too intense, but I thought it was great. I definitely felt like I was amongst other people who were really invested in their kind of future, and it was challenging, but it was fun, and I liked it. Yeah. The teachers were great. You can always feel like you can approach them, and they were there to help you. So, yeah.
Great. So do any professors or advisors or mentors stand out as being particularly impactful during your time?
Yeah, for sure. John Swaddle was my research advisor, so they didn't have senior thesis or anything like that, but I joined his lab after taking his, I think it was evolutionary biology course, I think as a sophomore. And I think he was relatively new at the time, and so he was looking for people to join his lab, and so I joined and started doing research with him on animal behavior studies, and then I stayed on to do another study on looking at bluebirds and the impact of golf course habitats on bluebirds. Yeah, so he was definitely the major mentor, and he was taught me so much. So I'm really grateful to him, and we keep in touch a little bit, on and off. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any other mentors or advisors, or also I always like to ask about the president at any given time, because William & Mary is so small. I hear stories of just proximity to the president. So Tim Sullivan was president while you were there.
Right. Yes, I definitely saw him at all the events. But what I remember was it the vice president, the tall, lanky guy who would ride his bike around? Do you know who I'm talking about?
I need to find out, though, because that is...
Yes, he would often just ride his bike around campus and just, be amongst the students, and so that was what I remember.
That's great.
Yep.
So, what are some of your favorite memories or experiences during your time?
Oh my goodness. It's a good question. Well, I'll say two. The first was the Yule log. You know how we do the Yule log every year, and I just thought that was so cool. It's super nerdy, but it's super cool. I just think that it's great that, people have been doing this for so many years, and we're still doing the same thing. So I love that. And I tried to go every year to all of those events and welcoming the students. I forgot what that's called. And then the other favorite memory was working in the lab and just going out into the field. It was my first time. So as a kid growing up, I didn't do a lot of like outdoorsy things. And then so working on these field research projects, that was my first time like being outside for a long time and like figuring out, how to keep yourself safe in like the Virginia heat, for example. So things that I didn't grow up knowing, but it was so fun to like work with the lab and just learn about the outdoors and appreciate the wild settings and learning about birds.
Right, that's great. And what did you do for fun?
For fun, oh my gosh, we were so nerdy.
I love it.
Well, at that time, Williamsburg was pretty small, so there wasn't a lot to do. So you had to like make your own fun. So we mostly hung out, watch TV, that kind of thing, watch movies. There was not even really a movie theater. There was just that one on Dog Street that and then they were actually closed for 2 of the 4 years I was there for renovations. So we really had like no movie theaters. We had the internet, so that was new-ish at the time. So I got my first email at the college, and then we just hung out. And then one of the things we did, I remember a friend and I went to, we decided we would camp out at Lake Matoka. And it wasn't, I think, built up. I think since then they've built like a lot of things around it. But at the time it was just this kind of like broken amphitheater. Have you seen pictures of it?
Not from before it's kind of current.
Yeah, it's so funny. And they would have music concerts there and stuff like that. But there was this old tower, and my friend and I decided we would like camp out there for the night, and it was fun. It was silly.
Yeah, I have not heard a story like that.
Yeah. So that's what we did. And actually it got really cold, so we went home at like 4 a.m.
You made it most of the night. That
counts.
We
did. Yeah, exactly. It totally counts.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Were there any restaurants in particular you liked to frequent?
Oh my gosh, what did we do? I think, is Tequila Rose still there? No, it's like this Mexican place. And I remember there was, oh my goodness, there wasn't a lot of ethnic food, but I think there was like one Asian restaurant in that shopping center with the Food Lion.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still there, but yeah, so we would go there. But mostly because of my scholarship, I had a meal plan all 4 years, and so I just did that. And I was happy to not have to cook and not have to spend money on food, so that was totally good for me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, kind of looking at the opposite experiences, what were some difficult or challenging experiences you had during your time at William & Mary?
Yeah, let me think. I'm really trying to think. Well, courses were always hard, right? I mean, we took studying very seriously, but that is typical. I think one of the, it's not like a sad memory, but I think it was difficult for me at the time was applying to graduate schools. So my senior year, I was looking around for my next steps and different graduate programs, and for that you have to pull together an application package, and so your CV, and at that time I didn't know what CV stands for, so it was like a big learning process. But then I had spent a lot of time writing the application, and I gave it to John, and he sat me down. He said, "This is not acceptable." And I was just devastated because I, had worked so hard on it. But I'm glad he did it. because I'm sure it was much better afterwards. So yeah, that was a little sad memory.
Yeah, that's a rolling process as
yes,
it is.
Yes, exactly.
But he helped you modify it?
He really did, yeah. So I was able to get accepted to Maryland, so that was good. I'm really trying to think of like other hard things. That sounds pretty lame. But yeah, I just selectively remember the good parts.
That is more often than not the case.
Right.
I think something about the human experience
yes.
does that. So were there any pieces, I like to ask, of your identity that you felt were particularly supported while at William & Mary or not supported at William & Mary?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think I did get more opportunities because I'm Asian, and I think at the time William & Mary was still not super diverse. I remember joking with my friend Matt. He's African American. He was in the music program, and we would laugh that if we were sitting together for lunch, they would try to take pictures of us, for the catalog, which I think actually may have happened once. But it wasn't that we felt not supported. It was. I think they were actually really trying. So I got a scholarship to study abroad in France, which I think, I don't know what the criteria were for choosing who received it, but maybe that helped. So yeah, I didn't feel like I was not supported, but it was definitely not as diverse as some other places. But at the time, coming from Ohio, which was even less diverse, I didn't hardly notice.
Yeah, I would say.
So.
Okay, so you were explaining a little bit of the experience of being Asian or an Asian American at William & Mary during the early 2000s. Is there anything else you want to expand on that? You said it was not a very diverse place at the time, but you were coming from a place that wasn't a very diverse place.
Right, yeah, so I didn't really notice. And I was paired with another Asian American for our freshman roommates, and so we became friends. And yeah, there were other students, especially in the biology program. So, I mean, looking back now, Asians hardly count as minorities in higher education, but yeah, so I felt like it was fine.
Were there any affinity groups or specific organizations that you joined?
Yeah, right. Yes, I was in the Chinese student organization, so that was really fun. I think when I first started, it was kind of a smaller organization, and then each year, people would graduate, new people would join, and I think over the years, more people participated, and it was just a really fun, nice group. We would put on shows, I think a couple times a year, one for the Harvest Moon Festival and maybe one for the New Year or something like that, and that was always fun, and there was one student, she was from Northern Virginia, and she actually had some formal training in like dance, in Chinese dance, and so she would teach us dance moves and choreograph the show for us. So I think having someone with experience like that made our shows better for sure. So that was really fun, and for some reason I felt like it was just a different friend group. So those from the organization, and then the people from my classes or from my dorms. So yeah,
that's great.
So yeah.
So in addition to joining that organization, you mentioned you participated in study abroad. I had a note when I was doing research that you were a Muskerley student volunteer. Is that
right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes. How long? It wasn't a long time. I think maybe only for my senior year. But yes, I had always loved art and drawing, and I was, especially in high school, really interested in it. But then when I did try to take art courses at William & Mary, it was always ended up being more work than fun. So that's where I learned that maybe it wasn't for me, but I still wanted to be involved, and so I volunteered and helped out at some openings, things like that. So that was really fun. I forgot about that. Yeah, is that still there?
Yeah, the Masquerade, it's about to undergo a really large renovation.
Nice.
So
that's great. I have to go back to see it.
Oh, definitely. But they've been putting on some great exhibitions, which I'm sure they were at the time we were there, too.
They had a Picasso show, when we were there, so that was amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a way to tap into that hobby, I guess, without adding a ton more to your scholarly work.
I did try. Oh, that reminds me, when I was thinking before the interview, 9/11 happened when I was a student, and that was one of the memories I had, was that it happened in the morning, and that morning I had an art studio class, and so it went from like 8:30 to noon or something like that, and so we had no idea. We just did our lesson that day, and towards the end of the class, I think our professor went to do something, and then she found out the news, and she came back, and like we could tell she was so shaken, and we had no idea, and so she shared with us what happened, and then she dismissed the class. I think she actually had a relative that was in New York at the time, and so it was really devastating. And then I just remember walking around in a daze, after that, going to the university center where they had the TVs in the basement, and just going to watch with the other students. Just shocked. We had no idea.
Yeah. What was the aftermath of that like on campus?
We were just trying to process it, and a lot of people obviously were from Northern Virginia, and so the Pentagon, and so we would just be sharing about, do you have family? How is everybody doing? And just touching base with everybody. It was really somber,
I'm sure.
So
it's one of those events no one forgets where they were at that exact moment.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And to be in an art studio, so not finding out for like 3 hours, it was a weird experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
how did you see other sort of sociopolitical, national or international events play out on campus during your time there? I'm thinking the war in Iraq. I mean, even something like the birth of social networking, which kind of came at the end of your time there.
Yeah. So I think we were less involved with that, but I think I did attend a rally, I think it was, about the war, and obviously we're students, so we're anti-war, and so I remember that being at the biology building in the auditorium there, and people showing up with banners, and just, we were trying to keep up, but it was a small, it's a local gathering, so I felt like inspired, to be a part of it, but then I wasn't really sure what the reach would be beyond campus. And I felt like we were pretty isolated from the local community, the rest of Williamsburg, so I didn't have a good sense of how other people felt at the time. So, yeah, I think because the internet was like young, this makes me sound so old, I think we were just a little bit less connected to like the broader global views of things. I did take a course called Globalization, and we did learn about the internet and kind of like the governance of the internet, so we thought a lot about that. But yeah, it was more scholarly exercise than anything we lived, so it was interesting.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And was there a reaction to like the rallies, the anti-war rallies from the administration?
I think they were actually supportive. I think faculty were in attendance. It wasn't rowdy or anything, so it was organized, and I think people knew in advance, so it was definitely peaceful.
It's always interesting. I think part of what we try to do with these oral histories is track different moments of activism or social movement on William & Mary's campus, because we do hear a lot that it was isolated or kind of a bubble.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
interesting to hear.
Is always really interesting to
Yeah, and I definitely felt like it was supported by the school. So.
So let's discuss what it was like from your perspective to be a woman on William & Mary's campus in the early 2000s. Third wave feminism, more broadly, was kind of in full swing in the United States during that period. Did you see that play out on campus in any way?
Not really directly. One of the great things, actually, I found about the faculty there is that there was a very good representation of women in science in that department. So our faculty was, I felt like, almost, evenly women and men. And so that was great. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized that's not the case at a lot of universities. A lot of the faculty tend to be male and older. And so so it was great for me to have those mentors that I could look to. There was Laurie Sanderson. I took a course from her. And Dr. Allison, I forgot her first name, who was a molecular genetics teacher. And so, so I thought it was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I was able to see that as a potential career because other people obviously do it. So,
sure.
It's great.
And so somewhat, well, definitely related to the kind of topic of coeducation is the topic of sexual harassment and assault on college campuses. And during the time you were there, and a little bit before, really this became a topic that was picked up pretty frequently in the Flat Hat and different news media. What was your level of awareness of this going on at William & Mary?
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think the extent to which I know about that is really in relation to the frat parties. I mean, everybody attended when they were a freshman, and so I think we were just so young, and there's a lot of alcohol, and there's a lot of underage kids just going overboard, and I think we were all just trying to figure out, meeting all these new people. So it wasn't, and I don't think we put it into those terms. Although I think there was a rally one time. I think take back the night. Does that? Yeah. So I do remember that. So yeah, we must have talked about it, and they were trying to raise awareness. And of course, it's a thing that happens, but it didn't happen to anybody that I knew personally. But it's messy, and it's a gradient for sure. And so, yeah.
It sounds like even if it wasn't being discussed specifically, let's say at the institutional level, there was definitely space for things like Take Back the Night to occur.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah.
So let's transition to your trajectory post William & Mary.
Okay.
You spoke a little bit about it when you were giving us a glimpse into your application process. So you pursued your doctoral degree in ecology at the University of Maryland.
Yes.
And then became a postdoc fellow at the National Socio-Environmental Center. And your Synthesis Center. And you are currently employed as a research scientist here at Lincoln Park Zoo. Yep. So do you want to walk, I mean, I kind of did, but do you want to walk us through kind of your trajectory and how you ended up in this place?
Sure. I mean, it was actually very circuitous as these things go. But when I graduated from undergrad, I had done animal behavior research, and so I was really thinking that I would just continue in that. And at the time, I actually applied to work with primate behavior scientists. And so not realizing how competitive, I mean, you knew it was competitive, but really it's way more than I even recognized. It's a competitive field, and so I wasn't able to get into a lot of those programs, but then the one that I did get into was University of Maryland that had a good affiliation with the National Zoo, which was in the DC area. And so that was why I ended up going there and joined their program. But then I joined the lab. David Inouye was my graduate advisor, and his research is actually on plant population dynamics. And so I joined the program, and then the summer before I started, he had funding to take me out to his the field station where he did his research, which was the Rocky Mountain Biological Lab in Colorado. And so I spent a summer there, and again, like I said, I hadn't had a lot of field experience, and the little that I had was in kind of like suburban Virginia. So this was my first time in the mountains and seeing, it was awesome. So I just loved it immediately and decided, well, yeah, I'll stay and do research here. And so switch focus from animal studies to doing plant biology. And then during my years there, I gained a lot of interest in modeling and data analysis, and saw the value of using data to help manage species. And so I decided on my project, which was to look at this plant that was being studied or developed for phytoremediation, which is where this plant can uptake heavy metals and it can be used to remediate old mines. And so it sounded so cool, but I was interested in, if you were just to introduce that to a mine site, is it going to become invasive? How will it affect the native ecosystem? So that was what I was interested in. And I did my dissertation on that, and I also helped my advisor analyze some of his data sets. So I just got a range of different skills through that. And then after that, I was looking for postdocs, and one of my committee members hired me on to work on a project that she just had gotten a grant for, which was to look at species listed under the Endangered Species Act and how science was being used to manage those species. And so that's really where the endangered species work comes from, and I love that. And then I applied to the postdoc at SUSINC, and got funded to further develop that research project. And so through all of that, I now have, animal behavior experience, population data experience, endangered species management experience. And then when I was looking for jobs, this opportunity came up. And so my experience was kind of a good fit, magically. So if you had asked me as an undergraduate, I probably would have said, I would love to work at a zoo, to help manage the species, but I didn't really know how to get there, but kind of a little bit coincidental that I was able to. So, yeah.
Serendipitous,
yes,
maybe?
Exactly, yeah. So it's really long story, but I got here eventually.
So what does a normal day look like for you? So outline kind of what it is that you're doing here at Lincoln Park Zoo.
So I actually have two major aspects. One is helping to analyze data for zoo populations, and so by that I mean all the zoos actually manage their animals as a population across the zoos. So like all of the polar bears in the North American zoos are actually considered a population because they can move them around and breed whoever they need to. And so there's a group of scientists here at Lincoln Park Zoo that actually help to analyze data and inform that kind of management of the animals. So I helped to do that. And then the other aspect is just continuing my own research, which is in population dynamics and just writing papers. So on the one side, I work with managers and zoo population programs, and then on the other side, I'm mostly just looking at data and writing papers.
I did see an extensive list of papers somewhere that you have published.
Yes, and so the two definitely cross as well. I just have a recent one submitted, I think it's close, hopefully, where I'm evaluating what is the role of zoos actually in conserving listed species. So they have, kind of projects here and there. You have a lot of examples that are individuals, but then across the board, like how much are we actually doing? So we summarize that, and hopefully that will come out soon.
That's a process, but very interesting.
Yes, so
cool.
That'll be great.
So how have you seen then your William and Mary experience prepare you or shape your trajectory afterward?
Oh man, easy question. I think just this focus. I think we really learned to focus, and actually one of the things that I personally learned from my experience was to also kind of let go of certain things. So as a high school student, I was super intense, I'm going to get the straight A's. And then I went to William and Mary and realized, like, everybody is like that here, and there are some things that you just need to let go and just enjoy yourself and figure out, which are the important parts that you do need to focus on and which ones that maybe it's not so important. And so I think that kind of prioritization definitely helps in life. So yeah, I chilled out a little bit in college. So yeah.
So in what ways, if any, have you remained involved with William and Mary, or have you returned since you graduated?
Yeah, not a lot of involvement. So I'll be helping out with the William Mary weekend in Chicago this weekend. And then we've definitely been back a few times because when I was in Maryland, we would go back to visit friends or go to the beach in North Carolina and stop there. So we've been a few times, but it's been a couple years, and every time we stop, it's changed. So it's fun to see, all the changes.
What kind of changes have you seen over time?
Yeah, mostly structural, because when we go back, it's just, we're stopping in for the day. So the new buildings by Lake Matoka and the new University Center and that new building next to the University Center.
Oh, the Coeducation Center.
Yeah, so that was new. Yeah, and the first big one, I think, was the dorm that they built on Barksdale Field. Yeah, so I mean, it's not new at all. No, but that was built since I left, and I remember seeing that for the first time. That was cool. I mean, it makes sense. You need more dorm space.
And there are 2 movie theaters now in addition to
man.
Kimball. I know, can you imagine?
I can't. I hear there's also a bowling alley and actual things to do.
Some still, in Williamsburg might argue with you, but yeah, it's bigger than when you were there, it sounds like.
That's probably true. Oh my gosh, I do remember going to do the historical Williamsburg things, for fun. Mm-hmm. You were asking about what we did for fun. And that was so silly. We went to one of the taverns and they had like bar wenches. It's so goofy. That's what we did for fun.
And millions continue to go every
summer.
Yes,
do they still have those?
Oh yeah. It sounds like when you went to visit William Mary, you came right between the window of students leaving and tourists coming.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Had a little sweet spot we've been in the past couple of weeks as well. But yep, people still come by the thousands and the thousands.
So amazing. Yes.
I know.
And the cheese shop, of course. That's still there, right?
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, we definitely went and had our fair share.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you just noted a couple of changes you have seen, mainly structural or the footprint of William and Mary. Mm-hmm. Are there any changes you'd like to see happen with William and Mary?
Actually, I think like one of the best things about it is that it's got such a long history and a lot of things that they do. And so for me personally, I just love, as I said, like the Yule log and those kinds of historical traditions. So I just hope they keep those you know, maybe modernize it in some way to make it more popular, but yeah.
And speaking of changes,
Mm-hmm.
William Mary just elected its first female president.
Oh,
so
that's exciting.
pretty exciting.
Who is it?
So her name is Catherine Rowe.
Okay, cool.
She will be the next president after Taylor Reesley leaves this year. So
that's awesome.
while things like the Yule log ceremony remain, this is a pretty
That's
significant
really cool.
change.
Yeah, definitely. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there anything people should know about William and Mary that might be helpful for them to know to understand it better, or from your experience, even if it's negative or difficult, something that might be helpful or productive for people to know about the place as a institution?
I'm not sure. What would the broad in the broad scope? I'm not sure. Yeah.
That's okay.
Nothing more specific than what they already advertise.
Sure. All right. So, considering we're about to kick off, truly like this month, really, the celebration for 100th anniversary of Coeducation at William and Mary, can you tell me what you believe to be the value and contribution of women?
Oh, wow.
It's a big question.
That sure is. Oh, I mean, it's something we think about all the time. I don't know. Such a hard question. I feel like it's something that we're struggling with constantly. I'm a mom, and so working and the work-life balance is always something that we talk about. And I'm fortunate that my husband definitely does an equal share of the child rearing, but it's not the case a lot of times. So I don't know if you count it as a contribution, but just the fact that we do it, we carry on.
So maybe the biggest contribution.
Yes. So yeah.
We could even narrow it down though to to a college campus then.
Right. Well, diversity in general. I feel like, I mean, when I was there, it was pretty equal males and females, wasn't it? I think so. And I really didn't feel discriminated against. So yeah. I don't know.
That's okay.
It's not very satisfying.
No, it's, you mentioned that it was an incredibly diverse place to be while you were there, and I think that the diversity among students at least has increased.
Okay, that's good.
A significant amount, but I think there's still waiting to see similar changes
at the faculty level.
Yeah, faculty and even higher up in administration.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the case, I feel like, everywhere. And I think partially because I went on to an institution like University of Maryland, which is a much larger institution, and with its own problems, I just feel like, they're doing as good a job as they can. So it's not just a singular, problem. So yeah, and we're trying to change that. And I do feel that responsibility too, being a woman in science, and I recently got my first NSF grant, and I was able to hire staff under the grant, and so I worked really hard to make sure I hire diverse people and just give people opportunities. And thankfully I have really qualified and really excellent people, so I'm happy to be able to do that for the next upcoming scientists. So yeah,
that's great.
So you have just run through my questions, but I always like to open it up at the end to you. If there is anything I haven't asked you that you thought I would ask you, or that you would like to talk about at this time, this is the time.
Okay. I just remembered one thing. The other kind of extracurricular thing I did, I volunteered at the was it the Language Center? I forgot what the name of it was, but basically I helped tutor English as a second language, and there were graduate students in, I think, probably the math or physics departments, and they were Chinese students, and so I would help them, and I did that for a couple of years. And I wonder if their experience is a lot different, because I did grow up in the States, and I don't sound, different. I'm American mostly. But for them, I wonder if it would have been a really different experience in Williamsburg, where you probably couldn't get to an ethnic grocery store. Do they have that now? Maybe.
Slight progress.
Yeah.
Direction maybe.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So
and so I really enjoyed being able to do that, but I did feel like a little bit that that it would have been hard being in Williamsburg and just having moved out of the country that you're from. So yeah, in a lot of ways, like some of these questions makes me realize how American really I am. And so
no, that's an excellent point. And when I think of individuals to interview and how to get a really good range of individuals who have come through William & Mary, I think it's important not to forget individuals who have actually quite literally come to America to participate in the degree program that they're in, and how that has shaped their experience.
Yeah, do you ever talk with the graduate students who just went to William & Mary for graduate school?
Yes, I do, and so that would actually be a particularly good demographic to look at, because I interview undergraduates, grad students, staff persons, faculty, and so this is just kind of another area that I think we would be remiss to miss those stories
for
as well.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, very. We'll have to follow up on that.
Yeah,
let
definitely.
You know how that goes.
Yes.
Well, is there anything else? Any other things you want to share before we wrap the interview up?
I think that's it. That's all I have.
Well, thank you so much for participating.
Yeah, thank you.
Taking time out of your day.
Yeah.